there, I'm Jackie Ferris. This week on the 302, we're at the Biggs Museum of American Art talking about Frieda Kahlo. You may remember her from her very colorful paintings or from her unibrow, but this week we're going to take a look at her through the lens of a boyfriend. Get ready, the 302 is just a click away. Artist Frieda Kahlo is famous for expressing her physical and emotional pain on canvas. But soon we're going to be talking about how she expressed herself through love letters and how she was captured in portraits of one of her lovers. We're here at the Biggs Museum of American Art and we're talking about the exhibit Frieda Kahlo Through the Lens of Nicholas Moray. I'm joined now by Kristen Matulowicz to talk a little bit more about this exhibit and another exhibit that's connected to it. Kristen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, let's talk a little bit about Nicholas Moray. He is a very accomplished photographer, but a little lesser known than Frieda Kahlo. Talk to us a little bit about him.
Yeah, so Nicholas Moray has a pretty interesting story, although he's less known, as you said, than Frieda Kahlo. He was actually born in Hungary and became sort of very quickly introduced into the art world. By the age of 12, he was already an apprentice in an artist's workshop. He then ended up moving to Budapest, where he went to the School of Art and Design there and learned about photography and engraving. He then actually ended up transferring, once he thought he had learned enough there, to Germany, where he went to Munich and continued specializing in photography and color photography. Keeping in mind, of course, this is early 1900s, 1920, and color photography wasn't as easily accessible at that point. So by the time he is 21 years old, it's 1913, and you sort of have these signs that war is coming. And of course, at that point, being a Jewish artist, he kind of got the urge to get out of Europe at that point, especially being stationed in Germany. And he came to the US, where he then opened his own private photography studio and specialized taking portraits. He becomes sort of recognized for his portraiture coming out of this studio, and he then gets contracts taking photography and portraits of famous celebrities and the movers and shakers and influencers of this period. Starting off in Broadway, going out into Hollywood, out to California, he starts really getting interested in artists in particular, including fine artists such as Frieda Kahlo. On a trip to Mexico, he actually becomes introduced to her then husband, Diego Rivera. And taking photos of him, meeting with him, he of course then meets Frieda Kahlo. Now, one of the things that is not known as well about him, particularly in the art world, is that he was an avid fencer and actually very good at it. He competed in 2 Summer Olympics as a fencing champion for the US. Of course, ultimately, he will end up dying of a heart attack during a fencing match that still kind of holds a recognition for him at that location.
So when you talk about his work, he was so accomplished and took pictures of all of these famous people, but he really kind of opened the door and set the standard for color photography. Is that right?
Yeah. So there was still some color photography happening at that time, but because he used sort of a wide range of photography types, as well as being one of the artists who was specialty trained in color photography, he becomes known for these bright, bold, very specific and vibrant colors. One of the art pieces that we have behind us, which is Frieda with an Olmeca statue, really highlights this. She's standing in front of the La Casa Azul, which was where she grew up, of course, and is holding the Olmeca statue. And it just really highlights sort of the very black of her hair, the bright blue of the house, and then all of the bright magenta flowers in her hair.
Now, they met in Mexico and started this affair that went on for years and years and years, right?
Yes, so they met in Mexico while she was married, as I said, to Diego Rivera, another artist from that time period, and they ended up creating a lifelong friendship that then turned into a 10-year love affair, where even though she was with Diego Rivera, she was writing these kind of scandalous letters back and forth, oftentimes even including sketches of her with her husband in a love letter to Nicholas. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, love all of me. This is who I am. It's kind of interesting. But it's good that the letters were published later after she had passed, because she's very critical, at least in some of them, of other artists, especially connected to a trip that she took to Paris, and she was supposed to exhibit a bunch of things, but it didn't really turn out that way.
No, yeah, so she went to Paris to do a big exhibition. She had recently become not famous in New York, but notable. She had a big opening in New York and kind of became part of that scene. She was starting to get notoriety in Mexico, not only as the wife of an artist who dabbles in art, but as an artist in her own right and for the images and symbols she was doing. And so through a connection that she met, she was sort of promised a private showing in Paris. And when she arrives in Paris in 1939, she comes to find out that that person no longer has a gallery, that there's no show being put on, and that person then tries to make the show happen, but the other galleries won't display her artwork because it's too much for their audience. And out of like her 25 artworks that she brought with her, only 2 were being willing to be shown in France. And so we have this letter that is very lengthy for her, where she really shares her opinions about the Paris art scene during that time and during that trip. And in fact, she ended up having such a bad reception in France that she canceled her London exhibition entirely and came back to the US.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about Frieda Kahlo's work when we return.
Hi, I'm Beth, and this is Ken, and we're owners of the Auditorium, and we want to startle you on the 302.
Welcome back. We're talking about the artist Frieda Kahlo and an exhibit that's coming up through the lens of Nicholas Moray. So we were talking a little bit, Kristen, about the kind of work and how only 2 of, a couple dozen could be exhibited in Paris. And when you talk about Frieda Kahlo's work, it's very passionate. She expresses her personal pain, her physical pain. In there, I guess, in a lot of dualities. There's a couple of, 2 images of herself holding hands. Talk to me a little bit about just the in-your-face color of Frieda Kahlo.
Yeah, so Frieda Kahlo was many things. Her portraits have become so popular lately, and even just in the last 20 years, she's kind of had an explosion in North America, even to the point that you can now find things with like her very distinct unibrow on like lunch boxes and wallets. And part of that is because she was good at marketing herself, and she was very different and original in how she portrayed herself and her identity as not only a female artist, but also as a Mexican individual, as well as someone who in many ways had her own hidden pain, both emotional and physical. So Frieda Kahlo has this sort of duality of who she presents to the world. And that is a very proud, very, in some ways, flamboyant Mexican woman, and that can be seen even in her dress, which is so great about this exhibition because it really highlights her as herself, as her own crafted artwork. So in her portraits, you'll always see her in a Teavana dress, which is a traditional Mexican dress where you have the full styling of it is sort of a elaborate, tightly done up with ribbons and flowers hairpiece that focuses your attention to the face, followed by a shirt that's a square cut traditional shirt, highly embroidered, also drawing attention to the face and the torso, and then a very long sort of floor length dress. Oftentimes these would be in light fabrics like cotton. Now, one of the reasons that she did this and she presented this imagery was to hide her physical impairments. As a young child, at about 8 years old, she contracted polio, which left her with one leg significantly shorter than the other. And she would try and kind of stuff her shoes to make it look even. But as an adult, she then starts hiding this with these floor-length skirts. And now on top of that, at the age of 18, she was actually riding home on a bus from school where her bus got into an accident and she had like a safety rail essentially impale her through her body, which left her almost an entire year on bed rest with corsets for the rest of her life, multiple different support systems and ability limitations that she then used this clothing to help hide, while also showing her national pride. So that's on full display here, which of course when she then comes to the US is not so commonly seen, and she becomes known for these bright, bold colors. So you have in her life this duality happening between how she's choosing to represent herself and then sort of her hidden struggles on the inside. Now, one of the portraits that we are showing here shows her painting the famous artwork you're talking about called Two Friedas, which is painted shortly after her divorce from Diego Rivera, and it shows her in one side in sort of a European style dress, and on the other side her in this traditional Mexican dress that she becomes famous for. And in both of them, her heart is exposed. On the European side, it's then cut and sort of a piece of it's missing, and she's taken the artery that runs from her heart to sort of your ring finger and has severed it. And then on the other side, her two figures are holding hands, and on her other side, she's holding a small portrait of Diego. So you have this sort of not only duality of how she chooses to present herself, hide her physical limitations, and sort of create herself as this image of Mexican heritage, but you also have her sort of playing in some ways with her own personal heritage, being half German and half Mexican, and playing with this mixed identity that was so popular in re-identifying Mexican culture after 1910, the Mexican Revolution, and kind of recognizing that there is a lot more of these mixed race individuals that are vital to the community.
Now, when you look at the two Friedas, if you've ever had a broken heart, you totally see what's happening there. You totally understand. But when you look at some of the portraits that Nicholas did, it really captures her. I mean, there's no mistaking who it is, and he captures the essence of the color, of the passion, whether it be love expressed in the letters or, anguish expressed in some of her paintings. He really kind of captures that and uses the color that she exudes and the things that she wears to, you know exactly what she's thinking at the time.
Yeah, and part of the reason that we're able to see that is because they did have not only this physical relationship and emotional relation, but just a lifelong friendship from the point that they met. And he's really able to capture the herness of her, the very Frieda-ness. Often in her pictures that are taken by him, you can see sort of her natural coquettishness that kind of peeks through. There's a little bit of a charm that just exudes through these photographs. Even the one that we have on display here, her with a magenta rebozo, that becomes one of her most famous photographs because it's so simple and so just vitally captures who she is in an understated way, which is so fun since she's just such an overstated person. She loved to make that entrance. Even at her final exhibition of her work, her doctor wouldn't allow her to get out of bed rest. So she brought her whole bed into the exhibition space and went to her opening in her bed.
And I guess in that photo, there's the Shah. She tells Nicholas that you'll always have a place right here in my Shah. So it's kind of like an Easter egg kind of thing between the two of them in that picture.
Yeah, and in that picture in particular, it was taken actually in Nicholas's studio in New York and then sent back to Diego while Frieda went to Paris for that sort of ill-fated trip. And when she returns from Paris, she divorces Diego. But why this is interesting in relation to this photo is this photo Diego loved. He thought it looked like a Renaissance portrait and how it was executed, how it was captured, and it actually hung above their bed for years because they kind of divorced and got back together later on. But on the back, Frieda wrote her own private love letter to Nicholas, even though it went to Diego and then hung above their bed.
That's amazing. That is truly amazing. So all of this can be seen in this exhibit, but when we come back, we're going to talk about a companion exhibit. We'll be right back.
I'm Sam Prestia from Barn Hill Preserve, and I love all the animals on the 302.
Welcome back. We've been talking about Frieda Kahlo and Nicholas Morai, but now we're going to talk about unmasking culture. So tell us a little bit about this exhibit and how it ties beautifully with this subject.
Yeah, so while we have Frieda Kahlo through the lens of Nicholas Morai up, we will also be having a collection of traditional Mexican masks that were collected by a relatively local artist here in Delaware. This collection of masks has a range of time periods that they were made from and are primarily wood. They have all different pieces and elements that they're showing, everything from masks with multiple faces on them, different animals, to sort of full scenes unfolding in these masks. The majority of them are going to be wood, but they were actually collected by and owned by an artist who exhibited with us right when COVID came along and kind of shut down museums, named Stephen Althouse. And he himself creates large-scale photographs, kind of about everyday objects. So kind of having that passion for everyday objects and kind of the beauty of them, it's natural that he would then collect these when he lived abroad in Mexico for a number of years. And so he's been nice enough to have us select and display about 40 pieces from his collection that tie into the imagery that was inspiring and part of Frieda Kahlo's life. While Frieda Kahlo had a lot of inspiration coming from the Olmec Society, which is from about 1500 BCE to about 400 BCE, these masks and this imagery and just this liveliness of celebrating culture was so vital in the early 1900s into the mid 1900s, and of course still today. But there's really a spike that happens after 1910. And so this collection of masks helps us understand how people choose to represent themselves, choose to celebrate culture, which then of course ties in with Frieda Kahlo deciding distinctly to dress a certain way, to present herself a certain way.
So we're talking about masks that go beyond the sugar skulls that a lot of people are used to. We're talking about masks that used to, portray a certain mood or a certain deity or something like a ceremonial kind of thing in Mexican culture.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, so they portray all sorts of different things. Some of the ones that we have on display are just kind of figures of old men with long beards and kind of ears sticking out on the side. We will also have displays with animals of them. And these would be used in all sorts of different rituals, everything from just kind of having them at home decoratively to wearing them at events for certain performative actions.
And I read that for the most part, men would be the ones that would wear these masks, that women participated in some of these cultural and religious, activities, but for the most part, the guys wore the masks. Is that right?
Yeah, for the most part, it's going to be the men wearing the masks, even if they are portraying female figures. And this tends to happen kind of around the world in cultures that wear masks in performative elements of their societies. There's a tendency for it to be men.
Do you know why?
Honestly, I do not.
Well, that might be set for another show.
Yeah.
So if someone wants to see either exhibit, what do they need to do?
Yeah, so if anyone wants to see either of these exhibitions, we just need them to come to the Biggs. So the Biggs is located at 406 Federal Street in downtown Dover. We are open Wednesday to Saturday, 10 to 4. And this exhibition just opened on November 4th, and it's going to be on view until February 12th.
So you got to rush out and get your tickets. Can you buy them online?
You can buy tickets online. However, we are no longer doing just reservations. You can just walk in. We also, every single Wednesday, starting at 10:30 to 11:30, we offer a free guided tour of the museum. It does cover the whole museum, but we will be, every single tour, selecting a different item from this exhibition.
Excellent. Well, Kristen, thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back. For more information, visit biggsmuseum.org. That'll do it for this week's episode. We leave you now with some beauty shots from Silver Lake Park in Dover. Until next time, I'm Jackie Ferris. Tell them you saw it on the 302.